Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back for another DevReach speaker interview. I'm so excited. Today for our speaker spotlight, we have Jennifer Wadella, who is the director of Angular Consulting at Bitovi and the founder of Kansas City Women in Technology. And her talk for DevReach is going to take us in a deep dive on the Angular Forms API. Welcome, Jennifer. So excited to have you. Thank you for being here with us today. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
So good. How are you doing?
Good.
Did you light anything on fire for the 4th of July yesterday?
Absolutely not. We went into hiding. We have a 7-month-old and a dog that had diarrhea for 3 days after fireworks last
Oh,
year, so we were
heaven's
like, yeah.
sake. Oh my word. Oh, no. So definitely no, fireworks for you.
Nope, nope. We're like, maybe another year, but this year we're gonna just, like, find the quietest place we can and bunker down there, so
And bunker down. Oh,
mhm.
no, no, no. I feel that. Silencing headphones for the whole family, including the dog.
Reasonable,
Well,
reasonable.
I am so excited to get to know a bit more about you and your talk and just I cannot wait to actually get to hang out this fall. Can you, to kick us off, share a little bit about your journey into technology? Can you share with us like how your career journey began and got to you where you are now?
Yeah, I've gotten pretty good at, like, keeping this in under 2 minutes over the years. But definitely grew up interested in computers. Taught one of my computer classes in high school because the wrestling coach couldn't be bothered to like read the book on how to teach the class.
Oh no.
Um, and it was just like it was my jam, but it was also at the point that nobody was like, "Hey, do you know that can be a career path?"
Mm.
So went to school for graphic design and business management. Thought I wanted to be a creative director. Ha ha ha. Graduated, the economy was shit, nobody was hiring, and so I kind of taught myself to do web development to accompany my design skills because people would really only be willing to hire me if I could both design and build them a website.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I got into that, and then just fell down the rabbit hole into building software applications on the web. Started doing that full time and getting to know other engineers and being a part of that community, and it's been love ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you have both sides of that coin. I feel like it's a rare breed for people too. So that's awesome. Can you tell us about Bitovi and like am I saying that right? Is it
Yeah.
Bitovi or
Yes.
Bit?
Bitovi. Yep, you got it.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So what can you tell us a little about the company and what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I call us like a boutique JavaScript consultancy.
Mm,
Very high end software engineering. We are the experts. We are the thought leaders. We're the people who you're reading blog posts or seeing conference talks on.
mm,
And we love to help our clients, figure out better ways to build software, whether that's, adopting the latest, greatest coding techniques, exploring micro front ends, whether you should or should not be using them. But more than just delivering great code, we understand what it takes process wise to build great software. So we really help our clients with technical product ownership and agile project management and making sure that developers are set up to be successful in building the right kind of software products.
mm,
So mhm.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the Angular Forms API, which is your designated talk at DevReach. And for our listeners who are beginners, whether they're going to be there in person with us at the conference or whether they're watching this interview online, if they're maybe not even an Angular developer, could you explain the difference between a template driven form and a reactive one?
I So the difference is the approach and the way we do it in Angular. But if we're talking about like beginners and their experience with it, I think first understanding that there is a distinction between those two APIs is key.
Mm.
A lot of times when we're trying to figure out how to do something in forms, our first step is Google, right? Hey, how do I dynamically add a another form control to my form on the fly? And you're going to copy and code examples that you find, and a lot of times that might be an example given with template driven forms or with reactive forms. You cannot put the two of those together because they are competing with each other, and then it can be hard to know which event to prioritize, that sort of thing. This does warn an error now, but in older versions of Angular it didn't
Oh,
even warn. So a
okay.
lot of people were making this mistake, running into this weird behavior, and it was because they were mixing those APIs, not realizing they were distinct things.
I didn't even realize you could attempt to mix them. That was
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, and you shouldn't,
Right.
And it'll cause problems, but it was very
Okay.
easy to do. And so that was a very common mistake I saw from people when they didn't realize.
Okay.
The next thing is, I feel like a lot of times we lose the underlying understanding of how forms should work. We forget what an input should do versus what a radio button should do. And both the template driven and the reactive forms API are very tightly linked to that native API behavior, but you need to understand the why of the way we build forms just at a native level in the DOM to then understand and build those implementations on top of it. So I think that is kind of like a fundamental understanding for any developer, regardless of whether they're building in Angular. It's like, hey, do you really want a radio button? Okay, then why? How should this interact? Um, is something I feel like I see people struggle with because they try and jam a use case into something that was never meant to be used that way and then struggle with the fallout from that.
Hmm. Those are two really, really good things, I think, for beginners or honestly experienced people alike to look back on and remember during form creation. Can you tell us about what ways the Form API can help developers write cleaner, better code?
Yeah. So I feel like if a lot of times people get into some really messy situations where they are trying to do something custom. So
Mm,
a really great example of this is like, let's say a date picker. Maybe you need to build your own for your company to match specs. It needs to be tied into some sort of form, input because at the end of the day, we're basically just submitting, JSON objects to a server somewhere, and we're using forms as a mean to get that information from what the user wants to communicate it to whatever API is expecting. Um, and so you know that you have to display the certain thing in the UI. You need to take whatever that person does, and then you need to feed it somewhere in your form. And so I feel like a lot of people can go down kind of this weird rabbit hole with like getting into inputs and outputs and event binding and all sorts of things, and not realize that there are custom APIs built in
mm,
to Angular that you can use. So an example of this is the control value accessor, so that I've given talks about previously, which is essentially an interface that you can use that acts as a bridge between an element in the DOM and the Angular Forms API. So you can basically say, hey, this is technically a form element. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to take the input that I care about from the user and emit that in a certain way, in a way that the Forms API was meant to consume it instead of kind of getting bogged down in this input output mess.
which I find honestly a lot of people who perhaps are really, really used to how JavaScript does things and they come to Angular for the first time, it can be hard for them to know what to reach for like built in natively and
Mhm.
not just do it all with them, raw JavaScript. So I love that. It's wonderful. And I honestly am super excited for your talk. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I like doing this talk a lot because, again, we are writing code, we've got a business requirement, we've got some sort of project manager breathing down the back of our neck. We are coding to get from point A to point B as quickly as we can. And when you're just taking the first thing that works and going from there and not spending a good amount of time to, read the docs, understand the API, you miss that fundamental understanding and knowledge of all these other things that you can do that are going to help you write better code in the future. And so that's kind of the area I try and hit in this talk is like, hey, here's all this cool shit that's here that I've done the research on so you can take advantage of for the next time it's going to come up in your use case.
That's awesome. Well, forms are notoriously difficult for both a coding and a user perspective. So tell us about a tricky form problem that you were able to solve with one of the hidden gems you mentioned in your talk description.
So, like I mentioned, the control value accessor is probably the trickiest thing that you
Mm,
can do is, hey, I've got this custom form element. I don't want to like get bogged down in this mess and figure that out. The other thing that I feel like people struggle with are if you've ever seen those multi-form step wizards where you're like, okay, you fill out a couple fields here, you move to the next one, fill out a couple fields here, move to the next one. Is there like a good, elegant way to manage that or bring that all together? And this is where you could use the control container for that. And that basically allows you to communicate across components and still have like one kind of master form to rule them all. And you can spread that across different components and be able to tie into that without having to, create separate forms and submit them at every part of the step. So knowing that's there, knowing that is available for you to use can help you get through a lot of situations.
that's awesome. So, what are some common mistakes that devs can make when dealing with reactive forms or just forms in general?
I think people get really hung up on where to abstract.
Mm,
We're building a lot of design systems, we're building a lot of component libraries, and I'll see people try and do a lot with validation, or they want to kind of like try and not have to write the same thing over and over again and over abstract that. But then what they end up doing down the line is losing the ability to kind of get the fine grained control that they want. And
Mm,
yeah, we're going to have to solve validation problems over and over and over again, but that needs to stay like tied to, in my opinion, as closely as it can, the form input that's associated with. So, okay, I want data for name must be required. Instead
mm.
of trying to have like abstract that validation logic like several steps down the UI chain of however you're displaying it, it should be as closely tied in the code to where that name is being consumed as it can be.
I like that.
Hmm.
I for DevReach, we're
Hmm.
back in Bulgaria this year. Very excited. Have you been to
I
Bulgaria
have
before?
not. I have missed DevReach for the last couple of years, and finally the stars have aligned for me to be able to come this year. So,
I'm so excited. Do you have anything you're looking forward to most about DevReach or visiting Bulgaria for the first time? Anything that sparks your interest the most?
I mean, I've heard so many good things about the conference for years and years and
Good.
years, which is why I'm so excited to attend. I've never been to Bulgaria before. I will be bringing our baby girl along. She's a little expert world traveler, like 6 conferences under her belt now. So anytime I get the chance to show her the world and try new food, that's what we look forward to. So if you have good
Excellent.
Bulgarian food recommendations, people in the chat, send them my way.
Excellent. Oh,
Yes.
I'm so excited. Okay, so I've got one last curveball. You ready? Are you ready for
Okay.
it? It wasn't on the list, but
Uh oh. Uh oh.
I like to get to know not just your career interests during these interviews, but also just your personality a little bit better. So, if I waved a magic wand and all of a sudden we had 25 hours instead of 24, what would you spend your extra hour every day doing?
Oh shit. Um. Oh, that's a good one.
I feel like I'd say sleep, and that'd be so lame. So I feel like sleep should be off limits. Like you can't sleep.
I have such like a bucket list of like food related things. Like we've been wanting to like do some new pasta recipes from
Mm.
scratch. Like I have all these different cookbooks. Like I'm still working through the Dishoom cookbook. If people have been to Dishoom in London, like that cookbook is fire. So I think I would probably use that extra hour for recipes. And we're also doing baby led weaning right now with my child, and so we're rocking the air fryer and making fritters quite a bit. So
Oh my gosh, yeah. The air fryer was a huge game changer. My
uh,
oven's so sad. It looks over at us lonely, and I'm like, "I'm sorry."
yeah, well, we still I make a mean Dutch baby, so the oven will always be in use for that. But
Oh,
yeah.
that's amazing. Well, I just appreciate you so much for taking time out of your day to do this interview with us, and I cannot wait to see your talk and get to hang out with you in Bulgaria this fall. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. We'll see you all for the next one.